Welcome to episode 3 of our ComfyUI tutorial series. In this episode, I want to show you more tips on how to use the text-to-image workflow to generate images, explore more settings, manage multiple workflows simultaneously, and improve the interface for a cleaner look once your workflow is up and running. In the last episode, we created a simple text-to-image SDXL workflow. As you can see, I loaded a Juggernaut X model. Then the prompt text is encoded so Stable Diffusion can understand it. In KSampler is where the magic happens. It uses an empty latent image, then decodes it so we can see it, and finally saves the image in the last step. I'd like to talk a bit about KSampler and the settings available in this node. A seed is a specific number that determines the starting point of the random process used by the model to generate an image. Using the same seed with the same settings will always produce the same image, while changing the seed will produce a different image even if all other settings remain the same. Think of the seed as a recipe number in a cookbook. Imagine you have a giant cookbook where every recipe is numbered. If you want to make a particular dish, you look up the recipe by its number, the seed. Following the recipe exactly with the same ingredients and instructions will always give you the same dish. Under the seed, we have control after generation. And as you can see, it's currently set to randomize. So if I click Q prompt after generation, I get a different seed each time. This allows me to generate images repeatedly with each iteration producing a different image due to the different seeds used. The minimum seed value is 0, and the maximum value is a very large number. With such a wide range, you can generate an enormous variety of images, even using the same model and prompts. The chance of generating the exact same image unintentionally twice is extremely low because of the vast number of possible seeds. You can also change that option to increment, which means each time I hit the Q button, the seed number will increase by 1. You can add multiple jobs to the queue, similar to sending multiple jobs to a printer. Clicking the View Queue button shows all the jobs currently running, allowing you to cancel any job if needed. This feature is very useful for large workflows that take a lot of time, as you can cancel jobs if previews show they're not what you want. If you click on Extra Options, you'll find the Auto Queue checkbox. When checked, it will keep generating continuously once you click Queue. As you can see, it's still generating. Uncheck the Auto Queue option to stop automatically adding new jobs to the queue. We also have the option to decrement, which will decrease the seed number by 1 each time after a generation. Most of the time, I use randomize. When I have something specific in mind, I use fixed size and input any number before hitting Q. Then I can play with prompt until I get what I want. This is the image result for that seed. If I click Q again without changing anything, neither the seed or the prompt, nothing happens because there's no need to generate again. In the command line, you'll see that the prompt executed in 0 seconds. However, if I make any changes, like adding a space to the prompt, it recognizes it as different and will generate again. Obviously, changing a simple space in the prompt won't alter the result much. For example, let's change the eye color to green and try again. The result is a robot with green eyes. I can keep experimenting, and because the seed is fixed, subtle changes in the prompt can lead to variations in the generation, but keeping somehow similar. This depends on the words used in the prompt, as some words can have more impact than others. If I want a subtle variation, I can change the number of steps or the CFG value. For example, if I change the steps from 30 to 32, I get a subtle variation. Changing it to 26 or 40 or any other number close to the original value results in another subtle variation. To change those values, you have multiple options. You can click on the value and an input field will pop up. Alternatively, you can use it as a slider by clicking on the field and dragging left or right. Additionally, you can use the left and right arrows to adjust it. Keep in mind that the more steps you use, the longer it will take to generate the image. So we can do the same with the CFG value. If instead of 7, I use 6.5, I will get a subtle variation in the generation. I can lower the value to 6 and get another variation. Keep in mind, the lower you go, the less contrast the image will have, and it might look worse if your values are too far from the recommended settings for the model you're using. If I increase the CFG value, I get more contrast in the image up to a certain point where the images start to look worse again. So you have to find the sweet spot. For the model I am using, I get okay results between 5 and 7 for CFG values. But CFG doesn't directly change the contrast. It's more like a side effect. CFG stands for classifier-free guidance. If the CFG value is low, the model has more freedom, which might result in more diverse and creative outputs, but they may not closely match the prompt. If the CFG value is high, the model is more strictly guided by the prompt, leading to outputs that are more precise and closer to the description, but potentially less diverse. If you right-click on the KSampler node, you have an option that says Convert Widget to Input. There, you can see all the settings you can change, like seed, steps, and so on. That can be converted to input. But what does that mean? Let's select the CFG from that list. Now, we don't have that CFG value in the list, but we do have an input here labeled CFG. So I can drag a link from there and search for a node called primitive. This primitive node allows you to input data into your workflow, whether it's text or a number, and it will adapt based on what is connected. Since it's connected to CFG, it shows me the CFG value there. Having the value as a node can be useful if you want to use the same value in another node. For example, if you have another KSampler node and you don't want to manually input the same value into all the nodes, you can just drag a link from this node and all the other nodes will take that input. Also, because it's in a node, I have another option called Control After Generate. So I can change it to increment, and each time I hit Q, the CFG value will increase. This is very useful for quickly testing different values. If I no longer need the input, I can right-click on KSampler and choose Convert Input to Widget. Then I select Convert CFG to Widget. We have only one there because we converted only one, but you can have any value from the node as an input if you want. As you can see, now the CFG is back in the KSampler node. I will delete the primitive node, and this time I convert to scheduler to input. Now, if I drag a link and add a primitive node, again, you can see it adapts to the scheduler values. So I can change the values from there and test it with different settings. I will convert it back to a widget and delete the primitive node. This time, I want to show you something with the steps. So I will add that as an input. I will set it to increment after generation. Steps refer to the number of iterations or passes the model takes to generate or refine an image. Each step incrementally improves the image based on the given prompts and parameters. The more steps you use, the more refined and detailed the final image tends to be, but this also increases the computation time. So if I add one step and press Q, I get something, but it's barely visible because there weren't enough steps to capture detailed results. It's like an artist making only a few brush strokes. The painting will be rough and lack detail. The more steps you add, the more details will start to appear, but it will also take more time to generate those details. As you can see at step 15, it's starting to get some decent results. However, as I increase the number of steps, the generation time also increases. It takes under a second at 5 steps, but over 2 seconds at 14 steps. For this model, it's recommended to use between 30 and 40 steps, but more than that, it only takes more time and it doesn't increase the quality. It might even get worse quality. Let's revert that input. Another thing you can do is test different samplers and schedulers to see if one performs better than others. A good starting point is to use the recommended settings for that model, similar to what I showed you in the first episode with the models from Civit AI. On the empty latent image, in addition to width and height, you can also set the batch size. So if I set it to 4 there, instead of generating 1 image, it will generate 4. When it's ready, you'll see in the bottom right corner 1 of 4, and if you click on that, it will switch to the next image and continue in a loop. However, if you want a general view of all 4 images at once, you can use the X button in the top right to close the individual preview, allowing you to see all 4 images together. You can click on each one again to view it individually if needed. If you want to generate a large number of images more quickly, running in batch can save time since it's faster than running them one by one. This is the result for the 8 batch images. Looking at the command line, it took almost 30 seconds for 8 images. However, if I had done it one by one, it would have taken around 35 seconds on my RTX 4090. I will reset them back to default and change the seed from fixed to randomize. If you look at the Save Image node, you can see it has a default prefix named ComfyUI. However, you can change this to something else that makes more sense, like robot, for example. This way, all the series you do for robots will start with that name. As you can see, the prefix is now robot, whereas for older ones, it was ComfyUI. So let's say you have a working workflow and you want the interface to be more organized, similar to other UI designs like Automatic 1111 or Forge UI. What I like to do is press Control and then drag to select multiple nodes. Using Shift and click allows you to add more nodes to the selection. I usually don't select the Save Image node. You'll see why in a moment. Right-click and select the option called Convert to Group Node. This will create a special node that contains all the selected nodes. Give it a name like Text to Image in this case. Resize it to your liking, and there you go. Now it looks much simpler with just 2 nodes. If you want to change the order, you can do that too, and even more. If I right-click and go to Manage Group Node, I can find all the nodes listed on the left. For example, if I want to move the prompts just after the checkpoints, I can do that. After clicking Save, the node order will have changed accordingly. You can also hide the options you don't need, which will not deactivate them, but simply hide them from the node interface. For example, if I don't want the denoise option because I don't use it for text to image, I can go to the KSampler widget and uncheck Visible. When I save that change, the option disappears from the node. Check what each node has in terms of inputs, widgets, and outputs, and optimize the interface so it suits your specific needs. If you need to edit the workflow, you can always go back to individual nodes by right-clicking and choosing Convert to Nodes. This might look messy initially, but it allows you to see how the nodes are connected and makes it easier to edit the workflow. You can also convert just 2 nodes, like the positive and negative prompts, to make the workflow look more organized. This can be quite useful for focusing on specific parts of your workflow. If you want, you can convert all the nodes in your workflow. When you run it, you can see how each node loads on top. However, I prefer not to include the Save Image node within the group because the preview is too small and I couldn't find a way to make it bigger. That's why I keep the Save node out of the group. If you want, you can run multiple workflows at the same time. Let me show you. By using Control and selecting all the nodes, then Control plus C to copy and Control plus V to paste, I can create a duplicate of that workflow. To differentiate it quickly, I will change some words in the prompt for the second workflow. When I click Q prompt, you can see that it loads the first workflow and then the second one. However, maybe you want the option to choose which one to run and which ones not to run. So let's select all the nodes from the first workflow. Now, if you right-click outside the nodes anywhere on the canvas, you have the option to add group for selected nodes. This will organize all the selected nodes into a group similar to what we did in episode 2. If you right-click on that group and choose Edit Group, you can change its title to make it easier to identify. We repeat the steps for the second workflow. Now, you can move each workflow easily by selecting the group, not the individual nodes. But the cool thing you can do now is this. Right-click on the group and choose Bypass Group Nodes. This allows you to temporarily skip a group of nodes in the workflow, enabling or disabling their effects without deleting them. So if I press Q, you'll notice only the second workflow is running because the first one has been bypassed. So I can now bypass the second workflow, and if I want to enable the first one, I choose the option called Set Group Nodes to Always. If I test it, you'll see that only the first workflow is running. To remove a group, you can right-click on it, go to Edit Group, and choose Remove. To delete the nodes, simply select them all with Control and press Delete. I will delete the first group as well, and basically we're back to the basic SDXL workflow. You can also bypass nodes, but not all nodes can be bypassed. For example, if you try to bypass a node like the negative prompt that is required, it will show an error indicating that the node is missing and cannot be bypassed. To enable the node again, you can select the bypass option again. Let me create a quick node. From an empty image, I'll decode it and take a preview image from it. Then I'll bypass this preview node. Since it's not needed in the workflow, it won't save the image, but the rest of the workflow will work just fine. So if I choose to bypass again to enable that node, when I run the workflow, it will generate that preview image. Let's delete those nodes now. We can have multiple KSampler nodes to generate more images at once. If I select the KSampler node and use Control+C to copy and Control+V to paste, I get a duplicate. Then we can connect the links just like we did with the first one, but there's a faster way. Instead of Control+V, use Control+Shift+V to paste it with all the connections intact. But what I want in this case is to have another KSampler node that also saves the image. So what I can do is select all three nodes, KSampler, VAE decode, and save image by shift-clicking on them. Then with Control+Shift+V, I can paste them with all the links intact and use Shift to move them into place. I could paste another one if I want. You can have as many as you want or as many as your computer can handle. Then you can change the settings in the KSampler so you get different images based on the same prompt. But let's say I want the middle one to have a different prompt, like maybe I want it to have green eyes. Well, you can do that. I will disconnect the positive and negative prompts. Then I can recreate those as text encode nodes, or I can just copy and paste the original ones and then reconnect them as you would normally do. And I can change the eyes from red to green. Now I realize that at first, all of this might seem complicated. It's okay if you can't do it right away. Like anything, it takes practice. Start by learning to create basic workflows like we did in the last episode and try to understand each node. Eventually, it will all make sense. If you still can't do it, just watch and let your brain pick up pieces from it. In a few days, something in your mind will just click and you'll be able to move on to more advanced workflows. It's okay if you make mistakes. ComfyUI will let you know what the problem is. Like in this case, I didn't connect the negative prompt, so I can fix that quickly. Now, when I run the prompt, I will get the middle one with green eyes and the other two with their original prompts. As you can see, you can accomplish pretty complex tasks with just a few nodes. Over time, we can expand and do even more. I've seen people with 200 nodes in a workflow. Imagine being able to generate everything you need with just one click. I'll delete the last part of the workflow. Let's say you're happy with this workflow that generates two different images at once using two different prompts. Now, it's usually the part where I simplify the interface. I'll select all the nodes with Control and drag, all except the Save Image nodes, then right-click and choose Convert to Group Node. You give it a name and click OK, then you can rearrange the nodes and look at how clean and simple it looks now. So I have both prompts here and I can change the details I want in both prompts. When I generate, I can get two different robots at once. How cool is that? I can also change the prefix in the save image node, like maybe V1 and V2. So in the output folder, I can easily see which was generated with what prompt. And each time you want to make changes to the workflow, you can convert it back to nodes so you can see how each node is connected. That's all for today. Thank you for watching. Leave a like or a comment if you found something useful. See you in the next episode where we'll probably learn about image to image and maybe how to use LoRa models.